Hello there, Mad Mike here, and welcome back to the channel. And today we're going to take a deep dive on something, and this might be a bit of a long video. I'm going to let people know that ahead of time, so if you don't want to listen to that, then, tune out or, whenever you want to. But this is going to be something, because this is something that's kind of interesting that's really been popping up in the news a lot lately, mostly because of some statements made by Viola Davis. And that is kind of people turning on the film The Help, which came out in 2011 and also starred Viola Davis, Emma Stone, and Octavia Spencer, among others. Also, Bryce Dallas Howard and Jessica Chastain were also in that film. And Octavia Spencer won a Best Supporting Actress Oscar for that film. I believe Chastain was also nominated. So recently, Viola Davis has made some statements basically stating that she feels that the film The Help was a betrayal of imagery of black people, I guess. I'm going to read the exact quotes to you, and then I'm going to try and explain this a little bit, and then we're going to move into some stuff involving the movie, because I feel like this is something that's very strange that I don't really understand, because they're not making an argument that I think has any kind of basis. So let's go through the actual statements. So there are three separate quotes, and I'm going to go through all three of them. There's no one, okay, so this is directly quoting Viola Davis. There's no one who's not entertained by The Help, but there's a part of me that feels like I betrayed myself and my people because I was in a movie that wasn't ready to, in quotations, tell the whole story. The Help was created in the filter and the cesspool of systematic racism. So I think what she's getting at there is she's saying that the movie was kind of filtered by the Hollywood system into a piece of entertainment as opposed to telling the actual story. Now I'll get to why that's kind of interesting when given the source material, but her second quote is, "Not a lot of narratives are also invested in our humanity. They're invested in the idea of what it means to be black, but it's catering to the white audience. The white audience, at the most, can sit and get an academic lesson into how we are. Then they leave the movie theater and they talk about what it meant. They're not moved by who we were." I think that is completely wrong, and I will explain that later. "I cannot tell you the love I have for these women and the love they have for me, but with any movie, are people ready for the truth?" So she's saying that basically the movie kind of glazed over, I guess, what she considers to be the truth in terms of the portrayal of how these people were actually treated. Now, there are multiple instances in the movie where I think you can see how unfair and unjust the treatment of African Americans who were considered to be quote-unquote the help, hence the name of the movie, that were basically maids and wet nurses in rich, affluent, white Southerner homes. A lot of people that were descended from, very rich Southern land and plantation owners, including Emma Stone's character, who is kind of one of the main characters of the film. So what she's saying is the truth. So to go back into this, we're going to have to look at The Help as a film. Now, The Help originally started as a novel. It was written in 2009 by another author who basically there was kind of a legal situation where there was somebody who was a former maid of hers that basically came out and said that she had stolen her story. It was eventually thrown out in court because of statute of limitations, and because the author also claimed in a countersuit that basically Catherine Stockett, I apologize, that is the name of the author. She claimed that basically what the maid was trying to claim was complete BS, and that she had created the story herself. Now, in saying that, the story, excuse me, in saying that, you can take this one of two ways. Either A, she co-opted this woman's story, or she stole this woman's story, and then morphed it just enough and put it into a book, and then that book eventually sold. The other option you could take is that maybe this person decided that because the book had become popular enough that she could come in and say, look, this was based on me. I deserve some kind of a royalty for this. I think in reality it might be a bit of both, because I think that, a lot of times when people write stuff, they write stuff based off of not directly their experience, but maybe something akin to it, like something that they might know. So I could see maybe that being a thing. But I don't think that the story is 100% truthful. I think it is a creation mostly of fiction, although it is set in a real life setting. And it is a form of realistic fiction. It takes place in an area that exists. It takes place using people that do not exist, or do not exist in reality, or do not exist in the forms that they existed in the film. Um, so you have that, but if you can either take it that one of two ways. I take it as kind of a mixture of both. So I'm not going to say it's a true story, but it's kind of a Hollywoodized true story. So I agree with Viola Davis maybe on that point, that it was something that may have been true, that was put through kind of the entertainment filter, which many things are. But you can also look back at other films in history that have to deal with race as a subject, and a lot of them are fictitious. You can look at In the Heat of the Night, which I'm fairly certain was not based on anything real. I'm fairly certain it was based entirely in fiction. And then you can also look at To Kill a Mockingbird, which again I believe that was not based on real life events. I believe that was a work of fiction. But both of them still get the point across of kind of the horrors and the evilness of racism in society. One with To Kill a Mockingbird is obviously the intentional, the systematic racism of the judicial department and Southern culture at the time, and the judging of somebody not based on their character but based on their skin color. And then you can look at it kind of a bit of a different one within The Heat of the Night, where it's a different scenario where it's an African American man who's coming in who has legal power because he is an agent of, I believe, the FBI, and he is coming into a territory where nobody cares about that and everybody hates him, but he makes them respect him because he has earned that position. So you can still have that element in a work of fiction. So I don't believe that in that sense. But moving on to the actual film. Now, when you dive into the actual movie, which again, I actually like the movie. I think the movie's fairly good. The movie has more than a few scenes that I think show the brutality of racism without maybe showing all the gratuitous violence on screen. It's more of just the attitude and the ideas that are being put forward, and kind of the setting and what is considered proper and what is proper conduct and what is not considered proper conduct based specifically on race, which doesn't really make all that much sense. And kind of the first instance is we see Emma Stone's character. She's come home from college. She has graduated from Ole Miss University. The story takes place in Mississippi. And she comes home and finds that one of the maids who has been working for her family, who they're descendants of people that owned a cotton plantation, she had been removed, and the family lies to her and basically says that she chose to leave and stuff like that, which Emma Stone doesn't believe. And later on in the story, we find out the reason for that is this older maid had gotten her daughter hired into the help, and she was working in the home, and she walked through the living room while the lady of the house, Emma Stone's mother, in the film, is having a Ladies of Liberty, I think is what they call it, or basically just kind of a stupid bullshit meeting of white suburban housewives, and the daughter happened to walk through the main room instead of using the side door to come in directly into the kitchen, and she was then terminated for that. The daughter then took the mother. They were both terminated. They were both fired, and the daughter took the mother up north to their family in Chicago, where she died. And Emma Stone is horrified by this, as she should be. But the thing is that I think that this movie portrays people in a bit more of a moral gray area, and I think that maybe what people have a problem with is the idea that you haven't portrayed, there's, pardon the pun, but there's no clear black and white, right and wrong. There is some in the movie. There are actions that you consider to be wrong, but at the same time, there are also people in the movie who appear to be nice and friendly, and they're not, they're not the evil, boogeyman that they usually get portrayed as in film. And again, you can relate that back to stuff like In the Heat of the Night and To Kill a Mockingbird, where Abacus Finch is a white man who is helping out an African American who has been wrongfully accused. And even in The Heat of the Night, even though it's kind of a begrudging relationship, the local sheriff has to help Virgil Tibbs to solve the crime. So he is he has his hands tied, but at the same time he can't let anything happen to him, otherwise stuff's going to go down. So that's maybe a bit less of a gray area, but the Abacus Finch one definitely is, where they're kind of fighting against the world almost. But going back to the help itself, in addition to that moment, you have more brutal moments as well, like the arrest scene. So after Octavia Spencer's character is terminated from her job for bullshit reasons, they hire another maid. That maid then asks the lady of the house, who's played by Bryce Dallas Howard, and ironically her character's name is Hillary. I don't know if that was meant to be a mistake or not, but it does kind of carry a bit more meaning nowadays. But the maid finds a ring and she then proceeds to pawn it, but it was a setup by the wife to frame her after she asked for a front in money so that she could send both of her sons off to college. She has twin sons. She can only afford to send one of them, and she was asking for a little bit more money to send the other one off as well. And I believe, if I remember the speech correctly, she also says that she'll work more, she'll work weekends, everything like that. It doesn't matter. She just needs the money. So she finds this ring, she pawns it, and it's all a scheme developed by Bryce Dallas Howard's character. And then this woman is arrested, and Viola Davis is there as well, and because they all kind of show up on the same bus to go into the same general community, and they wind up taking her away as two male cops. They're both bigger than this woman. They take her away, and Viola Davis keeps saying, "Don't resist, don't fight it, don't fight it, don't fight it," because she knows exactly what's going to happen. And of course, this woman starts, she starts freaking out. Naturally, she starts freaking out. She starts saying, "No, I just want my purse." And as they drag her over to the car and they start handcuffing her, and when she starts to resist a little bit too much, I guess or she starts to keep resisting, she doesn't stop, one of the police officers takes out a baton and then proceeds to hit her with it, presumably knocking her out. And we don't see this, although we do hear the sound of the billy club connecting. So I think that is a very brutal scene too, and it's only about a minute long. And the end of the scene is actually the most brutal part, and it cements Bryce Dallas Howard's character of Hilly as this horrible, evil person, where she's literally sitting in a car watching this happen, and her son is in the car as well. So she's exposing him. She's teaching her children this systematic, this culture of racism. She's trying to pass this on, this hatred, this weird hatred, onto her children, which is even more horrifying, that you're spreading this kind of evil around. And that's what the scene is meant to instill. It's meant to say, look, these people existed. This is how this stuff was carried on for so long, is parents brainwashing their children into thinking this. And that is a perfect representation of that scene. But on the flip side, you have other people, again, like Emma Stone's character, who has been exposed to the outside world. They're not just stuck in this small little community in the South, even though she graduated from Ole Miss. She has, a job offer in New York. She has a publicist and stuff like that. So, she knows how other places operate. She knows, what things are like in the rest of the world to a certain extent. So she's kind of broadened her horizons a bit, which is what college used to do. And she kind of sees why this is wrong, and she understands that the woman that she kind of grew up with as almost like a second mother was wronged by this for no good reason, after all of the goodwill that she had given to the family. And I think that may be something that people have problems with, is that not every white person in this movie is portrayed as a racist scumbag. Emma Stone is not portrayed as that. Jessica Chastain's character is definitely not portrayed as that. And Octavia Spencer's arc in this film, I think is extremely interesting, because it's not your prototypical arc for a film like this. In a prototypical arc for a film like this, you would go down it would be the route of the woman who wound up getting arrested and beaten and stuff like that. Instead, she was fired from the same woman's house, from Bryce Dallas Howard's house. And then she goes to work for this other woman, Jessica Chastain, who's a newlywed. She's trying to start a family with her husband. Her husband is also used to date, long time before, I guess, used to date Bryce Dallas Howard's character, which is kind of weird because her and Jessica Chastain kind of look the same outside of makeup, although I think they made Bryce Dallas Howard a brunette for this film to differentiate the two. But the thing is that she actually has a connection with Jessica Chastain because Jessica Chastain kind of doesn't know how to be a wife to her husband. And when I say that, back in the 50s and 60s, it was kind of the idea that the man was the breadwinner. He would go out and work, and usually the wife would stay home and raise the kids and cook and clean. And that was just kind of the dynamic of how that worked. This is set in a time period in 1963 before. Before the women started to enter the workforce en masse, and then the workforce was multi-gendered. There were women in the workforce at the time, but it wasn't as big of a push as it was in the late 60s and going into the 70s. So that was kind of the prototypical housewife at the time. And she really didn't know how to do that. She didn't know really how to cook a lot of things or how to do a lot of things. And she opens up to Octavia Spencer about, she's had miscarriages and stuff like that, and she really wants to start a family. She doesn't want to disappoint her husband because she loves him and she wants to have children with him. And it's a very kind of intimate moment between two people that are sharing things about themselves. And Octavia Spencer, who's kind of, she's been there, done that. She's seen a lot of things. She has children. And then you go to Jessica Chastain, who's trying to get to that point, and she needs help. And she's turning to somebody that knows how to get there in a sense. Or knows more about how to go about things. She teaches her how to cook, which is kind of a funny scene. There are some drawbacks of the film. I will say that the shit pie is kind of a horrible kind of thing. It's amusing, but it's amusing in like a weird sense. Like you understand why. But that's kind of like a get your moment a little bit. And if you've seen the movie, you kind of know what I'm talking about. But that's a positive relationship. And then at the end of the film, they basically say like, no, you're we're never going to fire you because of what you've done. And the whole time, Octavia Spencer is worried about the husband because the husband used to be involved with the woman she used to work for. And there's this whole subplot where she's afraid about it finding out and stuff. And then at the end, she finds out that he's very grateful because he knows that she's been there and he knows that she's been helping his wife. And that act of kindness then gets kindness back. And that's ideally what you want in a human relationship. Not romantic relationship, but just human on human relationship is if you're being kind to someone else, you want them to be kind back to you. And in a lot of cases in this movie, that doesn't happen simply because of race. Now, one character I've been glazing over this entire time because I want to get to it now is Viola Davis's character. And really, her character is the central point of the film, along with Emma Stone. It's kind of a duality. And basically what happens is that Emma Stone decides she wants to make this expose or write this book about all of these women that basically work in these white households in the South, and they've basically raised the children for these white families, and they've acted as mothers, and why their lives and what happens in them. And she's kind of oblivious to the horrors of it, which I guess maybe kind of means that she was insulated to an extent. Which, again, I kind of understand in a little bit of a way, but at the same time, then we go into Viola Davis's character story, and we find out about what happened to her son, and we find out about what happened to her family, and we also find out some stuff about Octavia Spencer, because she comes in after that, and she also gives her stories, and there's a scene that I think directly contradicts what Viola Davis said about how it doesn't speak to people on a human level. And it's the scene where she explains how her son died, that her son was injured while working, and instead of bringing him to the white hospital, which was right there, and they probably could have saved his life, they loaded him into the back of a pickup truck, and they drove him to the black hospital, and then chucked him out of the pickup truck, still injured, and he wound up dying from those injuries because of the lack of proper medical care. And it's a heart and gut wrenching scene because it doesn't just apply to African Americans. It applies to the idea that somebody that lost a child, a mother who lost a son, a parent who has lost a child. And I think anybody who has children or anybody who has lost a child can sympathize with that kind of an idea, that kind of a pain. I don't think that is specific to the African American community, although the circumstances may have been. But the idea of the pain of losing a child or somebody that is very close to you is not anything that is specific to race. And I think that that scene in particular speaks to people in general, to humanity, as opposed to specifically one community. And I think that's what you have to do with films like this. You have to speak to humanity as a whole. You can't speak to a specific group in a sense, because it needs to appeal to, and when I say that, I don't mean just audience appeal, but I mean the ideas in the film need to appeal to everybody on a human level, otherwise they don't get it. Because if you say, okay, I'm only going to appeal to this, if you had a scene in there that didn't touch on humanity, then I would say that you were doing an injustice to the film, because it's more of a like she said, a lesson, a history lesson, as opposed to an actual film where you get to know these characters. Now, the other thing is that during that scene, the reason why she tells the story to Emma Stone is because Emma Stone doesn't know if she can get the book published if it's just the two maids giving the stories, because her editor wants more people. She says, no, we need more people. It can't just be two people. You need at least 5 or 6. You need more stories. You need more originality. You need more people. So that's her writing editor saying that, and she's basically saying that she can't do it with just the two of them, and they're basically saying that, okay, you just need to change the names around, and just, each individual story is from a different person, but really each individual story is from the two of them. And that's kind of how Viola Davis convinces her, is the idea of her son's death, which we also figure out is something that she hasn't gotten over, which is really mainly her plot in the film, is that by the end of it, she is ready to move on with her life and become something more than just a housemaid, which should be the ideal. It should be the ideal. No, you don't have to do this horrible job for the rest of your life if you don't like it, or if you don't want to do it. You can go and do something else. You can go and be somebody. If you want to go and start I think she at the end of the movie, she wants to go and start a writing career. In addition to Emma Stone, who now has her big break because she's been offered a job in New York thanks to the book. And at the same time, she has also exposed a lot of people, including Bryce Dallas Howard's character, which she gets basically her social comeuppance at the end. So I think that the movie, even though it is not visually brutal, let's put it that way, it's not like a Mississippi Burning or something like that, where it's just visually brutal, people hanging from trees and stuff like that. It's a niche story about a certain group of people doing a certain thing. It's about these housemaids in Mississippi, specifically in Mississippi, and specifically in this one community, and the things that happen in it. It is not a broad spectrum of everybody's story that happened, or the most brutal stories. There are hundreds of horrible stories that have happened due to racism in the South, especially in the 60s and before that, during the Jim Crow era. And the thing is that this was a story that was not necessarily explored in a lot of those films. A lot of that was side stuff, when people, have the help or the maids in the house. A lot of that stuff was kind of the side story in those films, where, you saw that this guy had, African Americans working in their house as, housekeepers and stuff like that. But they never really explored that story very much. And this finally did. And I think that it was as brutal as it needed to be to show what it was like. And it also showed the little things that, if you do one little thing wrong, if you come in the wrong door, if you walk through the wrong room, then you can lose your job and you can lose your livelihood. And in some cases, that was worse. In a lot of, well, I shouldn't say in some cases, but it was very bad in a lot of cases, because that, in a lot of parts, that was their only source of income. And that's kind of Octavia Spencer's predicament when she gets fired from Bryce Dallas Howard's home, she loses her income, so she has to try and find another job. But Bryce Dallas Howard deliberately spreads around town that she was a horrible maid and nobody will hire her. And she has an abusive husband. So by the end of the film, because she's been hired on permanently in this house with Jessica Chastain and her husband, and she's treated a lot better there, she now has the courage to leave her abusive husband and bring her children along with her, and she can support them because she knows that she's going to have a job. She's not afraid of being fired anymore because she's on equal standing point with these other people. Because even though they are employing her, they're grateful that she's there, instead of just kind of being like you're a disposable human, which is what Bryce Dallas Howard's character is. And again, I bring up the scene of the arrest because of that just shows what her character is in that film, that she is well and truly evil. So I think that it's not as brutal as reality, but no film ever is. That's the other problem, is that I did a video on this before where I was stating that if you're going to show racism, you have to show the brutality of racism. Otherwise, it doesn't get across, and it's just a watered-down version of it. Now, in this film, I wouldn't say they go as brutal as reality, but they get it across to the point that, these women were treated as second-class citizens by a lot of people. That, people like Emma Stone and Jessica Chastain were in the vast minority at the time. And the thing is, even at the time in 1963 when this happened, or when the story takes place, they are, all of the people that were in the film, in 1963, that's just kind of how stuff was in the South. That these people were second-class citizens because of Jim Crow, because of segregation. And 1963 was kind of when a lot of stuff was ramping up with the civil rights movement, and through the mid 60s, and that's how a lot of civil rights stuff wound up happening back then with Martin Luther King and various other civil rights leaders. So this is kind of a side story, but it sheds a light on something that hadn't been looked at before. Now, again, I say that this work is probably a combination of fiction and reality to an extent. This could have been, like I said, taken from that other woman's story that she claims that the author ripped off completely. And I don't 100% know if it is or if it isn't, but I would say that it's probably somewhat of a split between that, where there's some real life stuff in there and there's some fictitious stuff put in there, just for the sake of film and entertainment. But I've been drolling on about this film for almost a half hour now. But that's kind of the point I want to get across, is that the film does show racism in kind of a brutal way, but at the same time, it shows some of the characters in a gray area. And I think that's what a lot of people don't like about it, is that, and Viola Davis specifically states this, is that, it doesn't show them on a personal level. But I think it does. I think it does show them on a personal level, and I think that the scenes, specifically a lot of scenes with her, show that it's different when the characters are humanized, and I think they are humanized in this film. It's different when the characters are humanized because you're not looking at a villain and a protagonist. You're not looking at a side character that's there for laughs, or the best friend, or you're not looking at basic archetypes pretty much, except for maybe Jessica Chastain. She just kind of plays a bitch. She's very two-dimensional, actually. Not Jessica Chastain. Bryce Dallas Howard plays just kind of a bitch. She's very two-dimensional in that film. I would say that her character is probably the closest that you want to put to just a kind of a cookie-cutter evil person. But most of the main characters are very three-dimensional, in the sense that they interact with each other, and they have human interests and they have human motivations. And I think that's what you need to have in these movies, is you have to have a base of humanity. If you don't have that, then whatever message or whatever thing you're trying to put in this movie is just going to fall on deaf ears, because the characterization is horrible. And like I said, I think that she's wrong in the sense that it's a film that came from a cesspool of systematic racism. I can't get over that statement. That is just interesting. Considering this is a film that launched her career basically because I mean, even though she was in a lot of stuff before that, it was mostly TV, reoccurring television roles. She didn't have a lot of starring roles before that. That was a film that really launched her into the limelight and got her a lot of roles later on. And I am happy that she didn't really crap on the cast, the rest of the cast, and the director. For for the story of the film. Although you kind of crapped on the director because the director wrote the screenplay, you are crapping on him a little bit, but maybe kind of indirectly because maybe you're just criticizing the source material over the actual screenplay. But that's just kind of something I wanted to get across. I wanted to do a little bit of a deep dive into this because I felt that this is actually a very good movie. I enjoyed this film. And the film itself, I think, especially, again, Viola Davis and Octavia Spencer's characters are really the two standouts, and they need to be the standouts because the story is really about them because it's almost a book within a movie because Emma Stone's writing this book and it's these characters that are giving this book life. So it makes a bit more sense. And also just kind of the ridiculous behaviors that used to be commonplace back in the South. It shows you day-to-day life as opposed to the major stuff. We all have heard about, the stuff of like, we've all heard about the horrible thing, lynchings and stuff like that. But to look at the day-to-day to say like, okay, you can't walk through a room at a certain time or you're fired simply because of the way you look. Stuff like that is the day-to-day, and I appreciate that a bit more as the nuance for putting it in because it sets the environment up. It sets the environment of tension up, and it works. But I'm not going to keep going into this. It's just kind of a dissection. But I want to know what you think. Do you think that the hatred for the Help at this point, or not the hatred, but the disdain, I guess, for it from the acting and Hollywood community is justified? Do you think that it's still a good film? Do you think that it's the comments by Viola Davis are valid about the movie? I want to know what you think. As usual, put your thoughts in the comments below. And also, hit the bell for notifications, hit the like button, subscribe, and remember, I live my life free of compromise. Do you?